Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from Newslaundry.
Welcome to Newslaundry Chhota Hafta. For the full episode, subscribe because it is behind the paywall and only subscribers get access to uncut, complete content. Newslaundry Hafta is our weekly wrap of all that made the news, all that didn't, and all that should have and all that shouldn't have. We agree, we disagree, we critique, and occasionally we beat each other up. But it's all good fun. Subscribe.
This is a Newslaundry podcast and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of Hafta in the peak of the COVID era, but it has also been the time when lots of other disasters have hit us. Today on the panel, we have Manisha Pande.
Hello.
Mehraj Lone.
Hello.
I'm Abhinandan Sekhri, and joining us from Kolkata is Shoaib Daniyal. Shoaib is assistant editor at Scroll. Hi, Shoaib.
Hi, Abhinandan.
The big headlines of this week was actually Cyclone Amphan. We now know a little detail about how devastating it was. 85 people have lost their lives, mostly in West Bengal. 1.5 crore people in the state have been directly affected, and about 10 lakh homes have been destroyed. You had early this week the Prime Minister visit West Bengal, and they've also announced a relief package. So that was one of the major headlines. India is facing a locust swarm, the worst ever in 30 years. I think Pakistan's already had one. I mean, Pakistan's dealing with this, and now the locust has made its way to India.
Some very disturbing visuals from Jaipur, in fact. It was quite scary.
Yeah, there's border tensions have been in news for quite some time now. There have been some unusual activity around the Pangong Tso Lake area where the Chinese indulging in a bit of aggressive patrolling. We can talk about that. Then there's also a bit of tension with Nepal that we discussed last week. But while the Indian media, interestingly, has kind of ignored China, they've kind of gone after Nepal and said, oh, China is doing this. So we could probably discuss that. There have been close to 6 deaths of migrants on Shramik trains who've been on these trains to go back home. Deaths mostly caused because of hunger and starvation. And I think that was one of the major news points. And also the train diversions. We witnessed, I think, 2 to 3 train diversions.
Yeah, and from Chhapra it reached, I don't know, Karnataka? I don't know.
So that also made news.
Went to Orissa, I think.
Right.
And there was this video in the morning of passengers who said they have been taken to 4 states and they have still not reached home yet.
Yeah, and the problem is that these trains don't have food or water, and which is why we've seen, I mean, there are complaints at least that a lot of them don't, and all the platforms are empty, there are no shops. So it's, once you're on that train, you could, there's practically no way for you to get yourself some water or food. So that's why we've seen these deaths. Government has opened up Arogya Setu program code, announces reward for finding security flaws.
That is confidence. I'm impressed.
But there's a lot of controversy over that. People are saying these are only half measures. It's not the whole thing. The source code is not the whole thing. They're still trying to hide something. So these things have just come in. So we'll need to read up on this and see what is happening and what people
maybe some maybe techie can write in for us. All you hardcore tech overachiever geniuses listening to this, send us something on contact@newslaundry.com about this open source. How good or bad an idea is it, and how impressed are you or not?
ICMR has removed a price cap on COVID testing. Earlier, it was capped at around 4,500. That limit has been taken out. And India has resumed flight services. There were some delays and some cancellations, but people are now, by and large, seem to be flying from one city to the other fairly smoothly. Rahul Gandhi's remarks made a lot of news, again, as usual, where he basically said that he was questioned about Maharashtra and the coronavirus crisis there. And he said that there's a big difference between decision-making and supporting a government, and that we don't have a decision-making role in Maharashtra. We're just supporting a government. I'm not really sure why this I mean, it's a silly thing to say, but it's kind of true.
That's the first thing even I thought when I saw the bite, but later when I thought about it, I think it's a dumb thing to say. But
it's again one of those really politically dumb things to say, even if it's true. And Karnataka is going to be opening up mosques, churches and temples from June 1st. God knows why.
Yeah, this is something that I would want to talk about a bit, especially because this is an issue that has been discussed in many parts of the world. This is something we have in common. There's a debate that's happening in many countries. So yeah, I'd like to discuss that.
I think Manisha put it well. God knows why.
Yes. Well done. And Manisha's homestead Uttarakhand was in the news because there was this images floating around that there are forest fires, and even you on our Newslaundry WhatsApp group had got very concerned, and it turns out those are
old.
Who said it's old? It's not old. There is forest fire.
Yeah, but not to that extent. It's not that big a deal. They're saying it's not more or less than normal.
This is just you being Delhi media ignoring state concerns. See,
अरे
this is
यार.
what happens. News Laundry में मैं अपने state के concerns लाती हूँ and these Delhi walas just.
But authorities from your state have said, please don't believe all these visuals. They are from, some of them are from.
Some of them were also Australia ke forest fires. I don't know.
This is not from Uttarakhand.
Nevertheless bad. It's nevertheless. And it's yearly, it's been bad. It's been progressively bad for the last few years.
Right. And of course, in other news, Ivanka Trump draws flack for that tweet praising that migrant who cycled carrying her differently abled father. And I thought even the Indian Sports Ministry said we'll give her a chance. She says, no thanks, I don't want your chance.
What ridiculous. This whole incident was really ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Times of India misreported that because we had a story we spoke to her, Jyoti Kumari, and her father also. She says she's focused on her studies, but if she gets an invitation from the Cycling Federation to come for a trial, she'll definitely go for it.
So do read that story in newslaundry.com.
So we will begin with this shocking and rather horrible disaster that struck Bengal last week. And in fact, we have an email from a subscriber who said that we should have discussed in a little more detail. And I'll come to that a little later in the emails. But why we didn't do it is that it had struck the day before we actually recorded. And that day, everything was down. And since we didn't have anyone on the ground there, we thought we'd give it a couple of days before we got someone to tell us exactly what happened.
Yeah, in fact, like, we read the morning newspapers. I'd given a little brief on the fact that at that time, we only knew that 3 people had died. And then, of course, the death toll rose to about 85 people. So there was very little information because everything was down. So we couldn't really give details on what really happened.
So Shoaib, you was there right through. Give us an idea of how bad was it when it struck? What does it actually feel like to be, in the middle of a cyclone? And ever since, how is Bengal recovering? What's the extent of damage?
Yeah, so I mean, cyclones aren't that uncommon in the Bay of Bengal. In fact, it's probably one of the world's most cyclone-infested places. But by any standard, Amphan was just this monster thing that swept in. I think speeds went up to basically something like 250 kilometers an hour.
Whoa.
At its max. So, which is just I don't even know. I mean, how to visualize that. It probably didn't go as high as in Calcutta because I guess Calcutta is a congested place. The storm was quite scary. My flat did. I mean, actually, we did have some damage. Actually, as it so happened, we got up in the morning and we found we had no water. And we tried to put on the pump, and the pump would go on normally, but there would be no water in that tap. So it actually turned out that a flying asbestos sheet had crashed into our pipe and smashed it. So, all these sort of things happened.
But the places hardest hit would be like right along the coast, right? Kolkata's a little inside, basically.
That's true. So basically, just to give the listeners a little geography lesson. So there's a thick, there's the Sundarbans forest which sort of hugs the Bengal coast. And that really protects Bengal. But of course, that means that the people in the Sundarbans really get rammed. This is why, for example, while cyclones arise in the Bay of Bengal, you'll always hear of Orissa getting really badly hit.
True, yeah.
And Bengal and Bangladesh, while they do get hit, but usually, they don't go through that sort of calamitous thing because the Sundarbans protects us. And Orissa, there's no protection for Orissa. So Orissa has beaches and we don't. Like there are no beaches in Bengal really, because our access to the sea is cut off by these mangrove deltas, right? That's the negative, but positive is it protects us from cyclones. But this was so fearsome that it actually came into Calcutta also, which is a good 100 kilometers from the sea at speeds of 180, 190 at some places were measured. So yeah, I mean, it was a pretty scary sight that day, and of course the city then went through terrible problems for the next few days. In fact, in many parts of the city, there still isn't power, still has been restored.
Another question I had was, because there was much criticism that English and Hindi media didn't cover the storm or the cyclone that well. I know NDTV had prime time on it, but other than that, I think, Manisha, there was the
Ram temple being discussed in one of the studios,
Yeah,
and
I
then
mean,
there
on
was
the
something.
day when, on the next day after landfall, they were discussing Shivling being unearthed at the Ram Mandir.
Right.
I think Times now completely ignored it for a long time. And then I think one fine day after 5 days, they decided to launch a campaign. In fact, it's so funny because Times now, they had a reporter there again. And I was just going through YouTube, that video stream just to see if they had anyone. So the reporter is actually reporting, but they've just put his report on the YouTube channel. So that means this guy, poor guy, the Time Now reporter, who was actually on the beach, in places, he didn't find any space on the channel.
Wow.
Except
Okay.
then Padmaja Joshi, I think she did a half-an-hour show when then this guy went around interviewing people, and that show was more like Times Initiative, donate for the state and all that. So it was a bit of a. In fact, they sent me a mail also saying, "Can you please carry it?" It was a bit of a PR sort of a thing.
Right. So one thing that, even back when I used to work with a news organization, which was more legacy, whenever I went to the South or went to, I mean, Bombay, it was a normal thing. They said, we don't call what you guys do in Delhi daily news, we call it Delhi news. And that was an ongoing joke, especially in Bombay. अच्छा आप आज तक daily news करते नहीं, आप daily news नहीं करते, आप Delhi news करते हैं. But the one place where I noticed that they didn't give a fuck was in Bengal, whether we covered Bengal or not. At that time, India Today Group and NTV were the only two big ones. Is that still the case, or now do they care what Hindi and English media is saying, or we are not being covered, or we are not being given that kind of representation?
So this time, actually, there was quite a lot of anger. I can't benchmark with what happened earlier, but actually, I also did a short story on it because I got internet back after 2 days, and when I logged on to all my social media, I only got anger saying that. And it was very interesting. It was anger against the media. There was some anger against Modi, the center, political center, because of that very small relief package. But mostly, I think when people in Calcutta switched on their television sets, they expected their physical sort of experience and trauma to be reflected on the TV. But on TV, they saw, कोई bus का fight हो रहा था, Priyanka Gandhi के साथ and all, which seemed a bit non-immediate if you just emerged from the cyclone. So there was a lot of anger, like very, very so Shridit Mukherjee, who's one of Tollywood's Bengali film industry's biggest directors, he had a very sarcastic tweet. He said that Kolkata and Bengal have Roshogollaed their way through 43, which was the famine, and they'll do through so again. Meanwhile, you can keep the anthem. So there was a sort of very sort of resentful anger that the national media had sort of blanked it out. And this is what Manisha brought up, I guess, was a great example that this poor guy did all this hard work, and they had the footage and they had the content, but somehow they didn't think. The editors on the desk did not think it would play well.
Is there a tendency, you think, of subscription-driven news platforms, because now Scroll is also has gone down the subscription way, to only, is there a tendency for us to cover things that have a political angle so that those who agree with the political ideology will consume it more? Or I don't know, what is your take on this?
So I think what I also personally struggle with sometimes with my journalism is, since we write in English, our readers are a certain class and background. So very often large events might happen which would not affect our readers, but they're still large events. So for example, just to do a thought experiment, if say Amphan had not hit Calcutta, then I think even the outrage that we saw would not have happened, right? Then not only Delhi, even the Calcutta media would maybe not have covered it with such a lot of intensity. It's only because, for example, like in a way that I guess there'll be a lot of overlap between Newslaundry and my readership and Scroll's readership. So if our readership, for example, is affected, there is a pressure on us to do it, which is really not there in many other cases. So this is an unusual issue that we in India face, because I guess
our society is also not that homogeneous. It's very segmented, and it's bracket along class lines, caste, linguistic lines. Yeah, you're right.
Great journalism, for example, I think English is where our great journalism happens, but it's also a language which 90% of the people can't access. So, there's a bit of this. So if you do great journalism in, say, Germany, in the German language, anyone, if they want to read it, can read it. But it's, I might do anybody might do, say, great reporting on Amphan. But, for example, most of the people we report on it, they will not actually ever interact with me as a reader.
Hmm.
So that's a bit of a it's a bit of a dichotomy for which I have no answer, but this is the problem that I have also sometimes faced.
Right. Anyway, thanks, Shoaib. I guess you got to run. Thanks for making the time. Take care. Be safe, and keep bringing us amazing reports, guys. Do check out Shoaib's reports on Scroll, especially the one on the Sundarbans.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Bye bye.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Bye.
So what Shoaib was saying about this being like, I also have pointed to this in one of the haftas, that English media by definition only reaches a certain section of the population. But as one of my former editors used to say, the saving grace is because the ruling class is also mostly either English speaking or aspiring to be English speaking. So they get to read this, and hopefully you always hope that it has some impact on policy making. So when they're
Yes.
making policies, when you bring out these stories, they sort of take this in their calculations.
Okay, now while Kolkata and Bengal deal with the disaster there are other mini disasters happening in our northern part of India, where trains that started from metros to take migrants back to UP or Bihar are landing up in Orissa. How does a train get lost? Mehraj, can you give us some gyan? Because I've seen all these burning train and all these films that they are tracking, this train is going there, this train is going there. How can it go so way off? It takes 9 days to get to a place where it should have taken 24 hours.
I am just at a loss. I mean, even incompetence alone doesn't explain this. This is at a time when they are running even a fraction of the usual number of trains that run on Indian railway lines, right? And
Right.
these are the people, they're running these trains especially for migrants. And it's not just these trains are getting lost, they are also not providing food and even water. And North India right now, for those of you who might not know, is under a severe heat wave. I mean, there's an advisory that you can't go out between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock during the day. Such intense heat. Imagine you are in a train without air conditioning. You don't have food. You don't have water. As a result, at least as we speak, at least 9 people have died on those trains. There were these disturbing, very heartbreaking visuals of this one little kid who was trying to wake up his mother who had died on the train, and she had been left on the platform. There was this another person who lost his 4-year-old child, and he was running around. When he got to the platform, he was running around looking for milk because he thought that would save his kid. There was nothing there. There's this other visuals of a train stopping at a station, and there's water bottles there, and they're just going, and there are visuals of people fighting over food.
Yeah.
This is such a desperate situation. And I don't think incompetence alone explains this. This is pure malice. I'm sorry to say this, but I can't explain this otherwise.
What do you think, Manisha? Because I have a take on it, but why do you think this level of incompetence can play up? That you actually run trains and you don't even think that you have to load it with stuff because people have to be fed.
And Piyush Goyal, I mean, look, there's also one thing is this has happened, and then there's a bit of shame in you to sort of, at least be somber about the fact that people are dying in the country. You've Piyush Goyal like tweeting some beautiful pictures and paintings and just brazening it out, or other, ministers not even saying anything. And I think the government today, they just said that, oh, these are extraordinary times. So, they've just blamed the time on the fact that it's very unfortunate, but these are also extraordinary times, which is fine. I get it. But it's really simple, right? And this is something anyone in India would know, because you just know that, okay, when there's something like this, you can just buy a bunch of Parle G biscuits, keep it in the train, just keep biscuits, glucose biscuits and water. You don't even need to prepare for meals. Fine, you can't give child dawal, whatever, but you can just keep basic glucose biscuits and water for people to just eat through the journey, and it's not expensive. And I'm sure if there's some coordination with even like companies like a Parle G, like maybe they could get them on board and say that, okay, we just need you guys to come and just, load these, help us with supply. I mean, things could be thought of.
Actually,
I think what explains is that actually it's actually Lutyens' Delhi phenomena, like these guys came to power trashing Congress and saying that, oh, you're Lutyens, you don't know, you're not in touch. But these guys are supremely out of touch. I don't think they know. So if you read the report today on what happened in the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court is basically questioning the center on what they're doing for migrants, the centers has just, it's shocking the sort of things that the Solicitor General said on behalf of the center, that, he's blamed journalists, he's called us vultures, He said that these guys are spreading negativity, they're prophets of doom, and that you're not showing what the good stuff that we're doing. So it's complete denial, arrogance, and really Lutyens, like the worst of Lutyens' Delhi behavior.
Back in March, I think, he told the Supreme Court that there was not a single migrant on the roads.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court judges, they just accepted it. I mean, all they had to do was just look out their balcony or their gated houses or wherever, and they could have seen it. They just accepted it. And 2 months later, they're waking up to it now.
It's sad that the Supreme Court has reduced itself to a joke, and at least among legal circles and friends of mine who are in the profession, they're like, the Delhi High Court has more credibility than the Supreme Court right now. But I think the shocking level of incompetence of mismanagement is a combination of two things. And I don't even think it's malice. It's basically, one is a lack of experience, which is of course not much better, that you've made such idiots ministers who really have zero experience of planning or administering. And the second is arrogance, that we won't talk to anyone. The thing is that if you have a large team, and I'll give you a small example from my experiences of production. Many times we'd go to shoot at a place where because I had done a lot of shooting, I knew if we're going to be, let's say, driving from Rewat, through the Madhya Pradesh heat to XYZ place, I know there's nothing there. We should carry everything. We should carry water. We should carry this. We'll get nothing there. But if a new production person would come, I've been to many shoots where the guy had not even thought, because that production kid had only been from, let's say, Delhi to Dehradun. So he knew that it's full of dhabas on the way. There are lots of restaurants. We can stop anywhere and get whatever we want. So he would load nothing in the car. Then suddenly I would go on a shoot with him to, let's say, Kutch. And Kutch, we are driving along a way into the run where there's nothing, there's no shop. And I say, is there anything in the car? He says, no, nothing. I thought there'd be something here. I'm like, dude, why would there be something here? But the thing is that explains that you have zero experience. I would just like to quickly tell you this story. When I was watching Hardeep Puri's, press conference that airports will function and aircrafts will start. And then I went and I had some chai, coffee, PK. I went, put on the TV again. And suddenly I saw a ticker saying, Uddhav Thackeray says, planes won't land. I actually started laughing. I was like, tomorrow morning they're taking off. Isn't it bizarre?
This is apparently the same thing they did with the trains. I mean, the finance minister of Kerala, he said they didn't inform us that the trains are coming and how they are coming. They're not following protocol with that also.
Yeah, man, it's a
and
disaster.
Because they need to keep track of these people and quarantine them, people who are coming from outside. So they're not even doing that. And this is one important point that Manisha pointed out, this timidity. And this one, even the people, they must be appreciated, people who are covering the migrant crisis, who are going on the ground and doing all this. There's one critical aspect missing from this reportage. It's like everybody is reporting it in a manner like it's just this natural disaster that's happening on its own, like this cyclone, and there's no reason for it. There's no man-made reason for it. Nobody is actually saying, okay, this is happening because the government is doing this, or they're not doing this. So there's no questioning as such. It's just that, okay, this is unfolding here, the migrants are suffering, this is suffering, this is suffering. Nobody is talking about the cause. That, I think, is what I found really missing from the coverage.
Irrespective of what you've been unable to do as a government, whatever your failures, it's just really distastefully arrogant to see them that after there's a 4-month-old baby that's also died of hunger. These are real stories that have come out. To then attack the press and say you're prophet of dooms, you're really, you're laughing at people's miseries also. It's these deaths are real. They have happened. You can't just negate it. Ye prophet of doom hai, ye hai, wo hai.
Okay, so then I just want to move on to this next. I'll just lay the context. Now, apparently China has crossed the line of control in Ladakh. And you can read Ajay Shukla's blogs on this. He says that they are actually, I don't know, maybe I'm confusing his piece with the Indian Express piece that I read. But there are reports that they're building not these tent type chabutras for their soldiers to sit. They've built like hard, pakka buildings for them to sit, to stay, or barracks or whatever they're called. And they are refusing to go back into their territory. According to some commentators and in the social media, the national media or any English or Hindi channels are not talking about this at all, whereas it is one of the worst incursions into our territory by China in the longest time. We got some people saying that, why don't you guys sort out the wheat from the chaff, what is true, what is not. So I'll let the two editors tell us, how does one actually get a story like this? How do you get what is true, what is not true? Either you have to have sources within the army to get the satellite images, or you have to have access to satellite images and be friends with, I don't know, Elon Musk or whoever. How do you get a story like this, and can we get one? Because a lot of people are asking for it.
No, report, of course, even the reports that you're going to see in the media are going to be MHA sources, ITBP sources, army sources. No one can really go to the line of control and really see what's happening there. So it's really all dependent on what sources you get. And these sort of reports are usually going to go to reporters who've been covering these beats for years. I can't just call up the spokesperson of Ministry of Defense and expect him to tell me. It means a lot of rapport building and really following a beat for a long time. So hardcore report is tough, but we are definitely going to have a nice explainer over the weekend by this guy who, Mihir Shah, his name is, and he earlier written a nice explainer for us and Rafael also. He's a defense analyst of sorts. So that should help. And in fact, as much as what I have understood from reading everything, there is, so the line of actual control that passes through Pangong Tso Lake is a perception. India perceives it to be at a certain point and China perceives it to be at a certain point, and both perceptions don't match. So there's no real agreed upon line of actual control.
But the incident is not limited to Pangong Tso, right? It was a similar incident in North Sikkim as well.
No, so there is. But the Pangong Tso one is one that, there was the Mukha happening there and all that. So in this case, what has happened is that there's a patch between the perceptions of our line of control, which is like a gray area, where both India and China have been patrolling for the longest time to sort of maintain dominance and sort of, keep, not give up that space basically and keep having claims. And both sides have entered that territory. Now, what has happened this time is that China has stopped us from entering that gray area and said, you go back to what we think is the perception of line of control. And they've aggressively tried to keep India out of there, and they've deployed more people there and deployed more boats. That's different because that means that they're trying to change status quo. And it's an aggressive act. And apparently, I think early May, around 6th, there was some, light physical altercation between the soldiers. And then the two, area commanders met. Usually what happens is that the Chinese and the Indian area commander would meet and try and solve issues and, but those talks have not worked.
Coming to the story, what is, you're an old hand at the desk and have much experience. What is a good way of getting a report on this, man? How does one report on something like this?
Like Manisha said, this is not just any border. Say if there's a problem with the Nepal-Bihar border, it's accessible. You can send people there. This part of the world is very remote. It's even remote for the military to reach, right? So there is no local sources you can send there because it's mostly uninhabited places. So the only option is you send a person from, say, Delhi or Srinagar or Leh there. But when the tensions are high, they won't let you go, right? So that's another problem. So the only problem is you get a very decent, experienced defense or strategic affairs correspondent who has watched these things for a long time, who has sources in the military in other places. Just talk to them and through them get a picture of what's happening.
So any report on this issue will have a slight bit of conjecture. Basically, you can't stop that, right?
Yes, even the so far the best reports which I have read so far is one is by Ajay Shukla and one is by Sushant Sen in Express. And it's not a coincidence that both of them are former military people, right?
Right.
They served in the military for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll have a lot of sources who will open up to them in a way.
Exactly. And so there's one thing, that I found very odd about this whole thing, that this is not an incursion and everything. There's one aspect which I think David has also written in his piece. So India was building a road there, right? Up to Daulat Beg Oldie, which is near the Siachen Glacier. And from that main road, they were trying to build these arterial roads to access the eastern part of Ladakh. What has happened is the Chinese that have come in, they have brought earth movers and they're undoing the construction on those roads. So this isn't really a perception thing. If India was building their roads there, that means it's like India considers it its territory, right? So if they have taken that over, it's very bizarre for the Indian authorities to say this is just perception. They're just whatever.
No, perception is at the Pangong Tso Lake. This road area is, I think, about 200 kilometers away from.
No, but apparently, so they have even come west of the Chinese line. So what the China claims to be the actual line of control, they have come west of even that.
That's true.
So
there's no doubt in the fact that they are being aggressive with something that is very clear. There's no confusion there on what is Indian territory, what is Chinese territory. there is a perception battle in the Pangong Tso Lake area. But that's been old, and that's, it's kind of par for the course for both parties to venture into each other's grey areas and petrol.
This mail is from Pratyay. Pratyay says, from getting a 1 month subscription, I just to binge watch all the haftas, to getting myself a 1 year subscription. I've come a long way since I got a job in January. Oh, Pratyay, I'm glad you got a job. I'm glad you used your money well and subscribed for a year. In the process, I have also convinced many friends to subscribe to NL. Thank you again, Pratyay. As long as we have ambassadors like you, we don't want people saying, "Aiye, kuch din to guzare Gujarat mein." We don't need Amitabh Bachchan. We got Pratyay, guys. Now, Manisha, if you could just tell me about that bite of Rahul Gandhi. Rahul Gandhi said something along the lines that, देखिए जो हम support दे रहे हैं सरकार को, देखिए हम सरकार में नहीं हैं, हम minister नहीं हैं, or whatever he said. Basically, what saying was Uddhav takes a decision, not him. And it is quite an innocuous statement. But Manisha, it's a really dumb statement, because what you're trying to do is that, dude, it's like basically, that economist or that who just plagiarized an article on Indian Express and they withdrew it.
Shamika Ravi.
Shamika Ravi.
You know what was the funny thing about that? Sorry. So a few days ago, there was this letter these intellectuals, economists, and everybody had written to the government, giving them suggestions how to tackle COVID, right? So, and there was this one suggestion which said, you take over all the money and resources, use whatever you need, and whatever the merit and demerit of that argument. So there was this whole bunch of, what you would describe as neoliberal economists, right-wing economists, who went berserk, saying this is an assault on private property. How can you say this and all that?
Yeah, I saw that.
Much pressure. And so Shamika Ravi was one of the leading people in that sort of movement, right? And then here, next day, there's this article which is plagiarized in academia. That is as worse an assault on private property as it can get. Right? Plagiarism is the greatest crime in academia.
I was wondering, how will Mehraj connect this to plagiarism? Very well done. Very well done.
Very well done. Well played. No, but what I'll say is that, the point I was coming to was that what Rahul did is what she did. What she said was factually accurate.
She went through 3 phases of apology.
Denial.
First denial, then acceptance. So first she said that lives are at stake and we need credible solutions. Calibrated attacks against me cannot be anti-COVID strategy for Maharashtra or any other state. So denial, कि भाई ये तो मेरी integrity पे attack हो रहा है by vested interest. Then second was mild acceptance, grudging acceptance, where she said regarding the IE article, there was genuine oversight. Have spoken to both Paul Brommer and Karthik Econ. This is their Twitter handles. There are perils to working in teams, but the buck stops with me. I should have done better and will strive to do so in future.
So basically what Rahul did was a version of this. That, what she's saying is true that there are perils working in teams. Yes, we all know that. We've all worked in teams. But putting it in the context of this, she's saying ki boss, meri galti nahi hai, unki galti hai.
Silly.
So similarly, Rahul was asked about the fuck-ups in Maharashtra. He says, boss, we are not leading, they are leading. So he did a Ravi basically. So now I want to talk to the panel about opening places of worship. But before I do that, we had a lot of emails come in this time. So Farouk, Shubham, he wants us to call him G, he or she, Mr. or Miss G, and Dheeraj, and Inderpreet, and Setju, Veluru, and Nijwum. I've seen all your mails. We will read them next time when we're in office and doing the podcast out of office when all of us are together, because it becomes, there's too much overlap when I'm reading these mails and others are talking. It's just inefficient. So we've got your mails. We'll only discuss Inder's mail a little bit to get, the views of the panel here. And then I'd just like to talk about places of worship and then we'll wind up. Inder says, dear team, it was very disconcerting for me to see NL team fighting and debating on Twitter with Swaraj this week. We are all human. Let's try to create a good dialogue instead of getting the whole discussion down to Twitter battles, which ends nowhere. An email exchange would have worked, or better, invite one of the reporters on record for a word, maybe on Hafta. Unless you all don't behave nicely, no one will be ready to sit at a table. Even media houses make mistakes. NL also does that. Admitting it is not wrong, but Twitter battles make admitting it very difficult. With NL versus NL out, I hope NL versus others is also done in a manner where one can disagree and still remain calm and cordial. No more Twitter battles, please. It brings out the worst in people. Aapka apna Inder. So Inder, I have a view on this, and I'll just tell you that, and then I'll let the panel give their views. Then we can move on to the place of worship. I was on a panel yesterday for Rolly Books with Nidhi and one reporter on why the media has got to where it's got to. And I said, Nidhi, your organization is responsible as much as any other. And I must say, Nidhi very gracefully took the criticism. I said 10 years ago, when I used to see you and Barkha sit on the panel and say, certain channels have said this, certain other people are spreading, information that is inaccurate, or is it, you did not want to name Arnab or Times Now. There was this thing that, oh, we are above it all. And what did that lead to? They just devoured the news ecosystem. I believe unless you call someone and name them and say, no, what you're saying is wrong. And if that person doesn't withdraw, I don't believe one should be courteous. I think one should be courteous in an exchange of ideas. What is your idea? My idea is blue is better. Your idea, red is better. Okay, let's talk it out. But if they have made a claim in a report about us, which is wrong, we will call out that your report is wrong. And there is no compromise. Either you withdraw your report, or we will metaphorically kick your ass on Twitter until you're embarrassed. Many of them are too shameless to be embarrassed. That's a different matter. But I disagree that when someone lies about you, unless it is an unequivocal jo bhi word hota hai, withdrawal of that lie, there is no compromise on that. Let's just come to this issue of opening place of worship in Karnataka. Now, just to give you context, in other parts of the world, Imran Khan was grappling with this because in Pakistan, there was, the Orthodox Muslim cleric said that we are not going to not do namaz. We will do bloody social distancing, go to hell. Donald Trump has recently said that worship should be included in what activities? What are they called? Essential services. Basically, churches are essential services. So you have to allow people to come to the church and jo bhi congregation jo bhi hoti hai. He's done it because that is his voter base. So let's start with you, Manisha, Mehraj. Do you think they should open places of worship, or is it an unessential service, or should we just leave it to people's discretion?
I don't think it should be a decision for politicians or religious leaders or anybody. It's a decision for epidemiologists. It's a decision for public health experts. I mean, yeah, obviously the politician will then have to sign on the order, but the decision should be taken by the person, public health expert. Why does religion come into this? I don't understand. I mean, but this is a problem. I mean, it's easier said than done because, I mean, people, when it comes to religion, are very emotional. So I don't know if you have just a few days ago, last week, in fact, earlier this week, there was Eid, right?
Right.
So Kashmir celebrated Eid one day earlier than like Delhi or other parts of India. That is because the previous night, in Kashmir, what happens is, so if the crescent is seen, new moon is seen in Pakistan, so they go with that, right? And the rest of the country goes with whatever the Shahi Imam says and all that. That happens because they are following an archaic system. I mean, it's a very cute system. I mean, it's very like traditional. It's a harmless tradition, but it's very archaic. These days, you can know like 200, 300 years in advance when Eid is going to be within like a minutes margin of error. If you just tell an astronomy, even a MA student of astronomy, he can give you a calendar. I mean, it's the same thing. Like in earlier times, for example, they used to do namaz according to the shadows of the sun and all that. Now you have a watch. You can do the same thing. You can ask an astronomer, just tell us when it is. But you don't do that because you have these religious traditions and all that, which are useless. I mean, even this, for example, celebrating Eid shouldn't be a matter for religious leaders, clerics. It should be a matter for astronomers and whatever, scientists and all those, weather experts. They can tell you. But it doesn't happen that way. So that is a problem. I mean, it's a problem of scientific temperament is not as developed as it should be.
What do you think, Manisha? Can you stop people from worshipping?
Of course you can, and especially in this, I mean, this is a real public health crisis, and I think people are also smart enough. I mean, people
No,
are,
they're not. Pata nahi tum kahan se aayi ho.
but I think even the devout will understand, yaar, ki ghar pe baith ke puja karo. And when it comes to Hindus, at least, and I mean even Muslims for that matter, like you do namaz at home. There's no, in fact, you just have to look at the direction, right? There's not even a need for a structure. If I'm getting
no, not at all. You can pray anywhere. I mean, Eid namaz was not done. Eid is a congregational namaz, right? And Friday is a congregational namaz.
But
But
otherwise,
if you can't do that, yeah,
And-
you do at home. I mean, it's if you can't do it, there's not like you'll be committing a big sin or whatever, you won't be forgiven.
Every Hindu household I know have a little temple in their house, a little place where they.
I don't know. I don't. I never did. But the point is that
you are a atheist.
no, we are Arya Samajis. We don't do idol worship. But the point is that
But anyway, regular Hindus, they have
regular Hindus, yo. Regular Hindus in the house.
regular Hindus have.
Yeah, you know, when you said people are sensible, have you seen the photograph of Lokhandwala, that coffee shop street? All those sensible writers of Bollywood, struggling actors, actresses. Ek din lockdown shift hua nahi, bloody, it's like a party happening there.
और
So,
ठेके
they
के
are doing that. Why will not the uncles and aunties saying, "Hum bhi jaake aisi rola pavan aiya, aisi rola pavan aiya."
वैसे there you're right, like सबकी श्रद्धा के अनुसार, like I did line up outside the ठेका to
हाँ,
buy.
तो तुम अपने मंदिर में माथा टेका ही, कोई अपने प्रसाद खाने टेका या
श्रद्धा अनुसार कर रहे हैं, but no,
आप अपनी श्रद्धा अनुसार दारू की लाइन में या प्रसाद की लाइन में रख सकते हैं. On that note, thank you all. Do write into us, and if you have any abuse to leave it on Manisha's Twitter timeline, and if she's in a spirited mood, she will fight you.
सुन लिया अफ्रीका, मुफत खोरों. Not to brag or anything, but Newslaundry Hafta features in the top 50 in the world on SoundCloud in the news and politics category for podcasts. So do subscribe and see what you're missing, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Subscribe, help keep news independent and free. All Newslaundry podcasts are available on iTunes and Stitcher and any other podcast platform.